Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 68 of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by Kelly, author of Flying Lead Change and the founder and CEO of Equus. We find ourselves at a time of interlocking crisis, not least a crisis of our own spirit, drawing us to desperately search for the sense of deeper connection and meaning that our souls are calling us towards, even whilst it feels we are seemingly drowning in a world that is descending into chaos. Kelly and her book are a guiding light of infinite wisdom that offers us a simple path to nurturing the true qualities of leadership that will restore balance and bring us back into right relationship with the land and ancestors, allowing us to see a world beyond the constraints of our current power over paradigm. Guided by the culture of the horse, one of the oldest, most enduring and successful species on the planet, whose destiny has been entwined with our own for millennia, she offers us the lessons she has received from the herd and the generosity of Indigenous elders such as Uncle Bob Randle. With a compassionate approach, she encourages us to lean into gentle self-enquiry, to heal our trauma, and shares how we can take the 7 principles of listening, care, presence, safety, connection, peace, freedom, and joy to come home to the true essence of who we are. A collective change of heart that offers a place from which we are capable of empowering the social change we are craving to enact a radical shift in the dynamics of how we do things. Nature misses us, and it is time to lay down the chains of shame we have wrapped ourselves in and choose to be radically authentic in how we bring more love into the world. Welcome, Kelly, and thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. You've got some incredible wisdom to share with us, which I think is much needed in the world at this time. We are going to be discussing your wonderful book, Flying Lead Change, which has only reached my hands recently, but has been in the world for a few years. But like all of these things, it's perhaps the time has come where it's needed more now than even when it was conceived by yourself. So we're going to be sharing that with people and lots of your other wisdom, because you've had a fascinating life and just a huge amount of depth of experience to draw on. But just to get us started, I always just like to ask my guests to share a little of their nature stories. So really just how nature's been a part of your life, any fond memories or any wisdom that you've learned from it along the way that you'd like to share to get us started would be lovely.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fiona, and thank you for this opportunity to be here and be part of your community nature story. So I guess what comes to mind was uh, I was born in northern New Mexico in the high country, so it's high desert. It's 7,500 feet. And shortly thereafter, my father was relocated as a professor to a kind of a large city in Texas, and
Oh, wow.
but a lot of his work was, back in New Mexico, and so I spent probably 4 or 5 months a year in the mountains, and then the rest of the time, back in the city. And I just remember the juxtaposition. I think that the juxtaposition of um, unfurling myself as a young person into the natural world and having so much freedom in that
Yeah.
in that space. In those days in the 1970s, 60s and 70s, it was sort of parenting by benign neglect. I say that very warmly. Just go outside, please, and get home before dinner kind of thing. And so, my partner, my parent, my friend, my ally was the natural world. And the smells, the beauty, the quietness, the spaciousness, and the freedom was a way that world parented me. Also, kind of an uncompromising tutelage. If I didn't track my way, and then I would get lost,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
didn't care. She didn't care. It was like, no, that's on you.
Yeah.
And if I got myself into a situation, I wasn't careful, I wasn't attuned, then I would pay the consequences. And I think that's something that, so many of us we don't get that kind of loving, caring, and yet uncompromising kind of instruction.
Yeah.
And so, and the, you know, the, the comparison between that and being in the city where, oh, it's a sidewalk that tells you where to go. That's how you
Yeah.
know where to go, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so obvious and linear and it's the sidewalk um and everything is kind of geared around comfort, but also a lot of noise and a lot of haste. And it was that juxtaposition that was the real teacher of, to me, what felt more sane, what felt more whole, what felt more true was that natural world. And I think it was the tension between those two that really sort of formed formed me as an adult to be um, curious about about that, and about that gap, and about how that gap between our real natural selves and who we're told we're meant to be, like, um, how that gap forms,
Yeah.
uh, what conditions are there that make us believe that we have to be this more domesticated version of ourselves, and how do we get back to that wholeness? And of course, that wholeness resides so beautifully within the natural world. So, yeah.
Yeah, oh, I love that. It's just, I feel like I can imagine you sort of in the forest and exploring. And
Mm.
I think one of the things that sort of stood out to me there was like you sort of said that nature was like caring, but it also like it didn't sort of smother you with that care as well. I think that, and that's something that you mentioned in one of the chapters of your book, which talks about your observations a lot of horses and
Mhm.
how they react to each other, and your beautiful lead mare as well, and how she cares for that. But it's, there's firmness as well in how she cares. It's not, it's not this softness. And I think that's what we have to find that, don't we? Like it's difficult. We've strayed as a
Yes.
society, haven't we, from
Yes.
really understanding how to encompass both sides of that. I suppose for some people they would call it a balance of the masculine and feminine, wouldn't they?
Yes. That's
That sort
right.
of, the qualities, and we have very much veered towards favoring the masculine qualities, dominance and sort of power in the way that it's shown in masculine rather than the feminine side of power. And I think that's a lot of what the initial bit of your book is about, sort of re-engaging with those feminine power qualities, isn't it? And the leadership
Yes.
side of it.
Yes. Well, you've said quite a lot there, and I kind of want to gather some things there to give it some more depth for folks. So, as a child who loved the natural world, it was a pretty easy half step to be totally horse crazy. So, um, as so many little girls were, but for me, I turned it into a whole vocation. Um, and I noticed that the horse world had attributes that were very powerful. They're the oldest, most successful, one of the oldest, most successful mammals on the planet, second only to the platypus at 150 million years. The horse comes in at 56 million years.
Wow.
Um, and that so what has led to that success, when so many other species have, gone extinct? What has led to this kind of success? And it has to do with their culture. And it is a power with culture. Hollywood says it's the dominant, aggressive male that runs the harem of mares, and
Yeah.
that's such a patriarchal lens. It's a matriarchy, which does not mean, in our in our patriarchal, colonized kind of mindset that's so pervasive in this world, it's easy to imagine that a matriarchy means a feminine sort of power over, right, others, but it's a power with. So it's a lateral hierarchy whereby all the members matter, but the glue is that the leadership that happens in the herd is through this power with, and it's through care and presence, not dominance and force. And yes, it is a combination. This care and presence is a combination of the best of masculine, feminine energies. And it's so interesting that in this power over paradigm that we live in, that care, that we end up in these polarities where there's just pervasive carelessness, with power over tactics in our institutions and the rising of fascism and all of these terrible ways that we diminish and dominate and discriminate against, weaker peoples or more marginalized peoples. So there's this like carelessness that lives. And then in that fragility, care for tends to over pander, we enable, we caretake, we cotton wool around things. And those two paradoxes, those two polarities create so much toxicity in the world. So if we learn from the horse, and the horse is such a great wisdom companion, because they're relational and because they embody this invitation to live differently, we see that care as a leadership tool, as a way to direct others and lead others, is, as you say, more robust. That one of my teachers is the holistic custodial elder of Uluru, named Uncle Bob Randle, and he talked about a term called kanyini, which means care and responsibility. And that responsibility is kind of where the teeth are, right? If I'm a child, I'm out in the forest, I'm responsible for myself and my safety. No one's going to do that for me. I'm responsible to be really present in that space. I'm responsible to take care that I don't step on somebody's home. I'm responsible to take care that I leave the place better than I found it. So it's a whole kind of much more robust way of thinking about care. So I love that you focused on that right away.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? How we have, I think one of the things that sort of came out to me while you were talking was this idea that like we have got this patriarchal society, and like feminism in many facets was about sort of almost keeping the same qualities, and just it, or being women rather than men that were, sort of leading in the same manner that men have led, but actually they were women rather than men leading. And that's, been what a lot of the pushback of it has been, is because, there's this idea of just like we're getting rid of the men to put women in, and it's that completely misses the nuance of everything that you've just said, that it's actually it's the sort of feminine qualities of leadership are much more inclusive, and you had a lovely term for it which you said was like it was more sort of linear and outreaching to inclusive of everyone having their own responsibilities within
lateral,
the structure. Lateral.
Right, lateral hierarchy. Yeah, that's right. Which isn't linear, it's more circular, right? If we were to kind of draw it on a piece of paper, if we could, it would be even more 3D or 5D possibly. But yeah, I mean, it's my own personal belief that this is one of the reasons why feminism has hit a glass ceiling. And it was an important evolutionary step for women and men who were allies to women to to step forward and say this way of a masculine dominated world is not going to work. It was an important evolutionary step, so I don't want to, criticize. And I believe it hit a glass ceiling because the true feminine calls in. She doesn't call out. She doesn't
Yeah.
shame. Shame is not a part of the true feminine or the powerful masculine, empowered masculine. Shame isn't a part of that
Yeah.
construct. So so how do we, call each other into a power with way of living and being that is beneficial to all and doesn't step on anybody else's heads or shoulders in order to make ourselves more viable?
Yeah, I think it's a it's so foreign to us, isn't it? In like
Mhm.
all of our structures, how companies are structured, how countries are structured with governments. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously talking about the predominant sort of Western culture at this
Mhm.
time. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, but it is it's requiring us to really take a step back and consider that there is just a completely different way of doing things, isn't it? Which is,
Yes.
yeah, really,
Yes.
it's just, which is it's
Um,
hard, I think, isn't it? It's hard for people to perhaps haven't, played in this space and this idea, and that they're so sort of ingrained into the culture that they've grown up in and just experienced that the idea of trying to see a different way is quite difficult. And that's where a lot of your work with the horses comes in, isn't it? Is that you provide this space where people can experience and witness themselves being in a system that's completely different. And that's
yes.
part of the power of it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So there is uh, there's first of all, I think understanding that this power over paradigm that we're in is relatively new on the human horizon. It hasn't always been this way. Um, it hasn't always been a patriarchy, and depending on where you stick the needle, so between 10 and 6,000 years that we took this turn.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of evidence that and by the way, humans are naturally collaborative, naturally peaceful, naturally connecting, peace loving. We naturally extend ourselves to other species. We're quite a beautiful species in the best conditions when we're in a good context.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, there's a lot of research that points to around 6,000 years ago that there was a lot of climate change. Um, and because of that, some very catastrophic natural events that collectively traumatized us. We became
Okay.
frightened.
Yeah.
We started not trusting nature quite so much that
Yeah.
she was no longer our mother, she was our perpetrator. And so we began thinking of ways to control nature and instead of partnering with her so that we could feel more safe. Now, I'm way oversimplifying, but you start to realize, oh, it's not that we're such a bad species. We're very traumatized.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when we're traumatized, one of the impacts can be that we turn against
Yeah.
and we get into a power over mindset. So because there's only winning or losing in the
Yeah.
power over
Yeah.
mindset. And
And
so
it's about
realizing
survival as well, isn't it, at that point as
that's right.
well?
It's
But
about
yeah.
survival.
Yeah.
So suddenly we have a much more compassionate lens towards us as a species. And if we treated ourselves, understanding that a kind of trance, a collective
Yeah.
trance came over our minds and hearts and eyes that was from trauma,
Yeah.
well, how would we then attend to that? You know, and we would start to realize that the water we swim in that is very hard to see, but is the water we swim in, is this power over paradigm. There's hardly a human on earth that hasn't been touched by it, and it impacts how we think, how we see things. Shapes our language. It shapes everything.
Yeah.
And so I think the first step is to recognize and wake up to the water we're swimming in and wake up to the ways that it shapes our thinking. Um, and as so I became an executive coach pretty early in my career and started to really think about what kind of conditions could I create for people to help them to wake up to all these limiting constructs
Yeah,
that shape
yeah,
our lives. And for a while, I realized that I I had to pair people with nature in order to help them because nature operates at a different frequency,
yeah,
as we know. And so when people were paired with nature, their nervous system would be kind of informed by a more power with approach to things without us having to talk about it. It just
yeah,
sort of happens. This is why forest bathing is so,
yeah,
amazing and healing for people because it's deeply regulating their nervous system. But there's a lot more happening than just that. So, I had been a lifelong and professional horsewoman, and I had when I was living in Australia, I had a horse who just wouldn't abide by the conventional approach to horse training. He was like, I'm not going to do this. This is offensive,
yeah,
and it's I don't want to be obliged to you in this way, and I don't want to be obedient
yeah,
for obedience sake. And I had to really change my approach with him, and this was a big undoing for me as a horsewoman because I had been on horses since I was 4. And, I didn't consider myself a unkind trainer.
yeah,
But now looking back, I see that they were all power over approaches. And it
yeah,
was all about bribery and corruption and manipulation and coercion, right?
yeah,
So, fortunately for me, this horse was sort of my great undoing.
yeah,
And the person that I had to become and the person I still have to become. I mean, I am still unlearning, the last however many decades of ways of being. Um, but the person that I had to be was the kind of person that set me up for better success in my life because I was coming from a place of more connection, more attunement, more sensitivity, deeper listening.
yeah,
And I thought at some point, well, why not pair my clients with that kind of journey? Because the horses are going to tell them the truth.
yeah,
So, not everybody can come out to Santa Fe, New Mexico and work with my horses. But the horses and what they're calling us into pervade every part of my business, all of my online work, all of my virtual coaching work. That work is available whether you're with them, physically or not. But there's this newly emerging horse-assisted industry that's
yeah,
not horse-assisted therapy per se, but horse-assisted learning where people are availing themselves to this wisdom that horses have to share, which is around these 7 core principles of their culture: safety, connection, peace, freedom, joy, all led through care and presence. That's the horse culture. There's a lot of ways you could slice that, but I think this is pretty solid. And so when people are called into that cultural context and they experience it with their felt sense, then some kind of internal compass starts to sort of change a
yeah,
little, just a few degrees south or north. And this helps them line up more with this, I'll just say, more awakened state. It's really sad that the word woke has become weaponized because
yeah,
really all it means is awakened to how life really is, which is profoundly loving, profoundly caring, and conspiring to bring out the best in us.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I've been lucky to have horses as my companions for
Mm,
almost my whole life. I was sat on my godfather's horse at like 3 months old, and I think it was like an energetic imprint in my soul. It was
yeah,
like, yeah, that's it.
yeah.
They're gonna be your companion for life, and
Mm,
like you as well. I have been fortunate to have a horse who has led me on an incredible journey of learning and wisdom. And well, I have two horses, but one of them was really the catalyst 15 years ago, and he, like me, like you, took me on that path of seeking out alternative ways of being with horses from that traditional, very regimented approach of this is how
mm,
things are done, and much more entered into a space of listening and being open to the lessons that he had to share and the way he wanted to live and sort of experience life. And they are amazing teachers and incredible in their gifts. And I think one of the things I just wanted to highlight about the fact that you talk about their culture rather than their behavior. So there are obviously studies about equine behavior, but
right.
this is there's a slight, again, nuance here of a differentiation between what you're talking about in terms of their culture rather than some of the behavioral studies that have been done, and it's your observation of how they collectively have a culture in the same
Yes.
way that we do,
Right.
um, which I just wanted to highlight to people that going forward when we discuss that. But
Mm,
it is just, they are amazingly profound in what they reflect for people, and it does give us this opportunity. I think something for me as well, it's connecting to something that's not human as well, which is again
mm,
sort of refinding our place in the world, isn't it? It's a,
yes.
and I think because of their size and sort of presence, like, they have this amazing ability to sort of, you see their reactions because they're, because of their scale, like it's more obvious to notice them in a horse than perhaps something, smaller that might be influenced by your presence. And
Mm,
obviously I think that's an important element as well, isn't it? Is you talked about your childhood and being connected to nature, and actually spending time with horses, it allows us to sort of breach this species divide that we've created
yes.
in our society, and that's an important element of it as well.
Absolutely. Uncle Bob was a very powerful wisdom companion to me. And one of the things he said is that, um, it's only our mistaken belief and thoughts that would lead us to think that we're separate from nature.
Yeah,
But one of the things he said that was really poignant is that he said, nature misses us.
yeah,
And I think there's especially for those of us that are sensitive and that have always loved and connected to nature, there can be with it a sort of shame about what we've done
yeah,
to the earth, and that the earth will be better off without humans anyway, and we'll just go on without us and all that kind of narrative. And um, Uncle Bob taught me that that's a very, very unhelpful and also whole completely untrue statement. Again, there's no room for shame in the natural world, and that's certainly not how nature feels about us. And, I know you've had an animal communicator on the podcast, and what's always amazing is nature is just so incredibly compassionate towards us.
yeah,
Um, and nature misses us. And Uncle Bob would say, if you doubt the belonging that you have to nature, just look at your dog and cat friends, he would say it that way,
yeah,
and your horse friends that show belonging to you. And he said that it can be harder with trees and rocks because they're all in one place and they don't move. But if you attune yourself to that belonging
yeah,
with the ones that are more obvious, like our horse, dogs, cats, goats, and things, um, that you can start to then use that same attunement and sharpen it to feel our relational belonging with the trees and the rocks and the clouds and the rivers. Horses um, are uniquely positioned as facilitators towards this awakening for several reasons. Um, One is that from an indigenous point of view, the horse, and there are stories ubiquitous across North and South America, that position the horse as not just an animal, but a wisdom companion
Yeah.
who was sent from the heavens to humanity as a gift from the heavens to help humanity to grow and evolve. And some of these stories even have a more kind of prophetic tone, pointing to that the horse has come to us at this time, specifically to help us during this cataclysmic shift happening right now around the world, that to help us choose connection over disconnection or love over fear. And in working with horses, and I think you probably resonate with this too, Fiona, is that they really are that. And they really do, they're happy to win ribbons for us or whatever. But if they're like, okay, if that's what you want to do, I mean,
Yeah.
fine, I'll do it with you.
Yeah.
But if we avail ourselves to deeply listening to what they have to say, then they really show up in a very, very remarkable way. And as you say, just biologically and neurobiologically, you've got these very large nervous systems and nervous systems are designed to, attune to and influence other nervous systems. But when you have these large ones paired with our littler, smaller nervous systems, then I apologize to any of the neuroscientists on your podcast, but so I'll way oversimplify here, but those larger nervous systems that are wired to be coherent with this culture of safety, connection, peace, freedom, and joy through care and presence are then positively downloading into your nervous system.
Yeah.
So it's like you get to have a sort of bath in these really beautiful frequencies, and you emerge from your time with horses or with a tree or with a cat or with a dog different because of that. So,
Yeah, there's some amazing research, and I know you have a very deep interest in neuroscience, and there's some incredible research about um like the heart coherence of horses and the amazing field that they
mhm,
project,
mhm,
and I find that fascinating as well. I think it's incredible, these beings. I love how you tie in like the indigenous wisdom and culture. You've obviously been had some amazing teachers in your life who've shared deeply and generously with them, and through your book you've been able to share that with us as well, for which we are incredibly grateful. I have a story that sits along with that, which about the horse actually as well, which was at a time when all of the animals became um, sort of not angry, but they sort of aware that the humans were taking the wrong path, and they were, sort of separating themselves and seeing themselves as sort of more important, and just generally moving away from that sort of right relationship with the world and the animal kingdom and the greater interconnected web of life. And a divide started to open up where the human was one side and the rest of the natural world was on the other, and they sort of were turning their back on the humans because they were, not behaving in right relationship anymore. And actually the dog and the horse sort of at the last minute leapt across this widening gap to say we still believe in them and we will be
mhm,
their guides back to you all.
mhm,
And it is powerful, isn't it, to realize that we have co-evolved with these creatures. They've been an incredibly important part of our history. Like, you go back and they have this immense capacity to have survived millennia that we can not really even comprehend, and actually that they have chosen, despite their strength, to work with us. One of the things that you do is you work at liberty with your horses, and I know through my own experience of starting sort of natural horsemanship as it was, and that for me was really profound, to be in an open space with these incredible beings that are so like so sort of strong and free world and freedom, like you said, that they encompass. And for them to then make the choice to play with you, because it really was, for me, it was the playing that was like just
Yes.
incredible, incredible feeling.
Right.
It wasn't an agenda, you know, it was when you freed yourself from that agenda and
Yes.
just were in the moment. And one of my favorite pictures of my younger horse, who's now actually about to almost turn 18, so I'm not really a baby anymore, was standing, we were standing in an arena, we were doing a clinic with an Australian horseman, and we'd been doing liberty work, and someone took a picture of me that I didn't know was being taken, and I was sort of stood up and I was talking to someone, and my horse is just sort of standing just sort of by my shoulder, just slightly behind me, all alert, very sort of tall and proud and looking off, but there's nothing on him. He, you know, there was no head
Yes.
collar, no rope, nothing.
Yes.
And we're in a huge arena with sort of 12 other horses and about 14 people, and he could have gone off and done his own thing, and he was clearly alert and aware of everything around him, but the fact that he was choosing to stay was just, to me, it sort of cracked open this amazing like gift that they have chosen us, and to honor that relationship by listening to the amazing wisdom that they have to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I can just see that image where he's all so bright and amazing and looking off into the distance of what's possible. And I love that you brought up the word play and, um, play and pleasure and love. These are all the words that circle around the natural world. And even Darwin, I think, mentions in his writings love, 95 plus times, and survival of the fittest twice.
Yeah.
And play and what was his high moral sensitivities were some other terms he used. Um, so, but there are a lot of folks who are listening who probably never met a horse or might be nervous of them or don't have access to them. And I would just invite that, if what you hear about them through this conversation inspires you, that's already them doing their work.
Yeah.
It's fantastic if you can have an experience of playing at liberty with horses. That's fantastic. And um, they're just to use this word, their frequency is so broad and so big that this is why indigenous peoples told stories for so many years. They sat around campfires and told stories because the stories would ignite something inside people. So if you hear if something resonates for you in listening to this conversation, that is itself already doing the work. And one thing that I've been delighted to learn is it doesn't matter if I live in an apartment, in Detroit, Michigan, and I have a little potted plant in the corner. That plant is ready and willing to have, impact on me and to be with me. And so really it's everywhere. There's nowhere one can't avail oneself to this frequency that's wanting to partner with you and wanting to call you back home.
Yeah, no, I love that. I had a lovely conversation with someone about sort of gardening for nature, but her brand is chasing bugs, and so she's like all about sort of connecting with the insect world, and the fact that that is open and accessible and available to absolutely everyone. It doesn't matter where you are, they're
Right.
everywhere, and you know, and I think that's the thing, isn't it, to remember. And when you said the lovely wisdom that Uncle Bob had gave you was that the natural world misses us. And I think we're obviously mentioning horses, but you've mentioned plants there, and it's sort of I don't know, an old wives' tale or something like that, that, gardeners who talk to their plants, the plants respond to that as well. They respond
Yes.
to that sort of connection and, real sort of care. Again, it comes back to care, doesn't it?
It
That
does.
they have with them. And so there is, there is sort of known through these threads that are known that have remained in our perception that we do have this connection and impact with the wider world, and
Mhm.
how we can, partner with it. And I think one of the things I mean, you mentioned your seven pillars, and it's they're all equally important, isn't it, as well? I think sometimes,
Yes.
with we have a tendency in our culture of rushing, and one of the things that you talk about is presence, and I
Mhm.
think that's a very important element of to sort of as a counterpoint to our current culture, isn't it? Is this idea of presence in the way that you present it.
Yes. Yeah, presence is very powerful. Um, in fact, this morning I was just reflecting. Uh, Artemis, my lead mare, is now my oldest member of the herd. She's always been the lead, even when she was the youngest member of the herd, but she's now 20, coming on 27. And, I've had her the longest, most recently, and she, she, I was reflecting on how much she signaled to me different things that weren't working for her, and how I wasn't listening.
Yeah,
And and of course, to listen deeply and well and in an attuned way, one has to be profoundly present.
yeah,
And one of the things that Artemis always calls me to is that kind of, and she calls me to it, and sometimes I'm very successful at it, and sometimes I fail miserably at it. And that's just the deal, right? I
yeah,
think that's part of that. We have to be willing to be so imperfect, and
yeah,
again, like, take the shame away,
yeah,
and just be aware. And so I was just also thinking about how that's informed my human relationships, and how how unpresent we are with each other,
yeah,
and how we don't listen. Not really, like, we hear the words, but are we really listening to one another?
yeah,
And I have, yeah, I don't know. I think that if we listened more deeply and listened to the signals and listened to, like, things like, are they pulling away? Has their energy diminished? Do they not look us in the eye quite so much anymore? These are all like signals that, like, what if we became more like horse whisperers to each other,
yeah,
and
yeah.
really paid attention to the gestures we make and other things, not just the words that we say. I think we'd be more successful with each other, because humans are complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I know for myself, I've often found that horses felt simpler to engage with
Mhm.
than people, and
Mhm.
it's true. I think even more so since social media and things has arrived, like we have so many demands on our time
Yeah,
that we have. And well, there's numerous things, aren't there? I mean, you've mentioned trauma, and
yeah.
there is a huge amount of collective trauma and personal trauma that people are dealing with, which
Mhm.
obviously impacts your nervous system, as you mentioned. Quite often people just are stuck in that sort of fight, flight, or freeze state for extended periods of time. They're under
Mhm.
immense stress and anxiety, which is created by the paradigm that we're living in. And I think we're getting to the point where we are, the sort of sickness is kind of overcoming us to the point that it's almost becoming an awakening for a lot of people, is like
Yes.
they actually can't, they're really struggling to exist within this paradigm that we've found ourselves now in. And it is then to sort of break through that and then find this ability to be present. And I know for me, nature has always been a place where I find that easier to do
Mhm.
when you take away a lot of the distractions of the sort of human world. And even then, but it's about, slowing down, isn't it? And just trying to really be aware rather than coming with your own agenda. Sort of what I mentioned with training my horse there is like you let go of the agenda and you just are in that moment. And it's not necessarily, it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy
That's
to
right.
achieve.
Well, and the trajectory or the sort of journey that I've noticed, and I'm still very much in, is that, first it was reconnecting to nature because that was a inherently very safe place
Yeah,
to, there's no masking in nature. Everything is just as it is.
yeah,
And it's very simple in that way, and yet very complex. I mean, there's all these highly complex systems at work. But that's not the end of it. Somehow we have to reconcile our relationship to ourselves
yeah,
because we're nature too.
yeah,
So, and in order for me to reconcile my relationship to humanity, I have to first reconcile my relationship to self, to
yeah,
myself, to the natural world that is, this body mind called Kelly. And so this attunement that nature has taught me now gets turned inward, and I get to be attuned to the wilderness within, which
yeah,
is my proclivities, my sensitivities, the way I somatically experience the world, how I feel, what I want, what I don't want, um and not try to domesticate it anymore
yeah,
and not try to, or numb or dismiss or gaslight all these things instead of just like, what does it feel like to truly be with this aspect of myself and totally honor it? And then I become more wildish in a way. And I a little bit start stepping outside of the fray of how a human is supposed to be.
yeah,
And I said to a friend the other day, I used to feel like it was really important for me to be a good citizen inside my relationships. Now I don't want to be a good citizen. I want to be an authentic citizen.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And the more authentic I allow myself to be, which is highly inconvenient at times. I mean, I'll be driving to go have dinner with people that I have committed to going and doing. And suddenly I'll get the sense, I don't want to do it. And so I'm at liberty with the horse inside me, right? And I'm like, okay, let's just turn home. Call them
yeah,
up, tell them you're not into it. I mean, it's very inconvenient, but it's very powerful
yeah,
because I don't have to be the horse stuck inside a round pen who has to be compliant, you
yeah,
know, um, and obedient. And so the more I allow myself to be authentic, just like I allow my garden to be authentic, just like I allow my horses to be authentic, then the more I appreciate humanity, the more
yeah,
compassionate I am with my fellow humans, and the less complex they start to be to me.
yeah,
Um, because I think part of what makes hanging out with humans complicated is, and this was something Uncle Bob asked me once. We were hanging out together having coffee, and he goes, "What's so what's so hard about being you?" And I said, "The way I have to like curtail myself in order to sort of appease people or fit in or whatever."
yeah,
And he looked at me with such confusion, like, "What? Like, why would you do that? I don't understand."
yeah, yeah,
So part of what makes it complicated to be with humans is the ways we knowingly or unknowingly, consciously or unconsciously, sort of cut ourselves into tiny pieces in order to fit in, right?
yeah, yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard to
It,
live like that.
I was thinking we've been trained to conform, haven't we? Very much
Yes,
like I was thinking, yeah, your lovely analogy of a horse in a round pen that's, been subjected to sort of, more uh dominant based trainings and
yes, pressure
coercion and
release, pressure release,
yeah,
pressure release. I mean, really?
And that's what we've experienced, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
From childhood through
Yes,
education, through our
yes,
jobs. Just our society is just structured that way. So it is. I love that idea of like rewilding yourself, but not in the sort of going, hippie kind of
no,
way, but in the like just returning to, I guess, your true essence.
yes,
That's the word that strikes me is coming home to the essence of yourself and being prepared to advocate for yourself, becoming a friend with yourself, which again is, dealing with the trauma and having compassion for the society that we live in, everything you've experienced. And I mean, towards the end of your book, you actually share, I think it's the survey or questionnaire that you send to people who work with you, and it's sort of an open inquiry into self-care and self-love and the different aspects of your experience where you can be neglecting self or honoring yourself, I suppose, really, for want of
right.
another word, rather than getting into sort of, good and bad. It's just about whether you're authentically listening to yourself and engaging with your body, because we're taught to not really, aren't we? We're taught
Yeah,
to just conform and do what has to be done rather than what feels right and is authentic to us.
yes, exactly. That's right. And you think about some of the torture that, people have levied against other people throughout history. A lot of it has to do with dismemberment, right?
Yeah,
And so we literally and figuratively cut our heads off from our bodies.
yeah,
And that's how control happens. That's how conformity happens. So the return back is return back to our body. And it's only really in our conversation together that this connections happened more clearly, that it's no different than the natural world. It's just the wilderness of our body,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so how do we be with all of those signals that our body has in the same way that we would be with a sunset, a beautiful tree, a raven flying overhead? um, how do we be with that in the
yeah.
same way?
Yeah, I love that. I think it's about like we don't really judge a sunset, do we?
No.
Not to the same degree that we judge ourselves. It just is. It's like, and I think that's also important is to set ourselves free. You mentioned shame earlier, and shame comes from a place of judgment, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very important that we're gentle with ourselves, and this is a journey, and we bring awareness to these things. And I would encourage people to definitely read your book, because it's very gentle in the way that it guides you through
Mm-hmm.
this process, and you have some beautiful exercises at the end of each shorter chapter within the greater pillars that you've mentioned, that just encourage us to lean into self-inquiry, because I think that's the other thing is, like you said, intrinsically we are loving, caring, there's
Yes,
there's
we
people,
are.
and it's there is goodness, if that's what you want to call it, but love is perhaps probably a better word. And it's just bringing in this like gentle inquiry of exploration into there is a different way to exist, and we have amazing people like you, the incredible people that have shared their wisdom with you, that you shared, and also these amazing companions like the horses, the natural world, who are there just waiting for us to open up this conversation with them and go,
Yeah.
oh, hey, hang on a minute. Like, could you help me with this, as I'm, basically a little toddler trying to take my first
Yes.
step and learning to walk and stumbling and falling and not doing it very well. But I mean, I know that we're probably getting towards an hour, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface with the amazing wisdom that you have to share. But is there anything that you feel like we haven't touched on that you would like to share at this moment?
Um, Thank you, Fiona. It's been a really, really generous conversation, and I too, I just feel like we could go on and on. And I think that, the book ends, the book culminates in a whole couple of chapters on joy.
Yeah.
And joy is one of the tenets of the equine culture. And I have a course that I do every year called Wisdom of Thriving it's an online course and it's based on it's a deep dive into the book, basically.
Yeah.
And we just finished a cohort, and we were on joy, and the book ends in joy on purpose. And the reason it ends on joy is because when one lives according to the principles of safety, connection, peace, and freedom through care and presence, joy naturally arises
Yeah.
not as a felt sense, although it can, but as an intrinsic part of our nature, of who we are. And there's a whole bunch of stuff around joy in the spiritual new age industrial complex around, joy and live a joyful life. And there's so much misunderstanding about
Yeah.
what joy really is. And it was so fascinating at the end of this course last night that everybody on the course sort of got it in their body that joy is so much deeper, quieter, and intrinsic to who they are, that when you are just yourself, that is in fact joy. And I would even go so far as to say that we are the embodiment of joy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean we're happy all the time. It just means we're true.
Yeah.
And so I just want to leave people with that as a kind of koan, to kind of hold in their hand the possibility that um, this way that you're inviting your listeners into to be nurtured by nature,
Yeah. Yeah.
is a path to joy,
Yeah.
which is our birthright. So
Yeah,
I'll leave
I
it
love
there.
that because I I love the way the book ended with that feeling of joy, and I think I think the way you present it is an understanding that it's it kind of it, it comes from the journey rather than like it being the destination, as it were.
Yes,
And
that's right.
yeah, I think it's important because I think there is a lot of like, you know, messaging within the sort of, the energetic practitioner language that is, sort of you've got to be positive and like, that
Right.
you've got to maintain this like, perfect level of happiness and never feel anything else. Otherwise
Yeah,
you've not achieved enlightenment. And I think joy as kind of is just therefore like there's almost like a pressure to like be
for
like
sure.
falsely happy, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's what it's seen as, is joy is like this,
yeah,
sort of skipping around the garden and like,
I
without a
know.
care in the world. And
Yeah,
actually your definition of it is much deeper and I think embodied and probably in a way more achievable to people as well, actually, which is the beauty of it.
mm,
Really at its core is it's about returning to our essence of who we are, of love and compassion and joy. And then, by doing this work, we show up in the world in a completely different way. And we have the ability to lead and to hold the vision for people to see that there is just a completely different way of being. And that's really the premise of your book, The Flying Lead Change, is the fact that we're at this point in our society where everything that we're currently doing is harmful to people, society. There's a lot of social injustice alongside the harm that we're doing to the natural world and our environment. And we do need to come together and find this poise within ourselves to be able to do this like complete change of direction. And if people haven't seen a horse doing a flying lead change, I'm sure if you went online, you'd be able to
YouTube and do like slow motion
yeah
flying lead change.
to
Yeah,
see
and
this
just yeah,
amazing movement that they do. But
yeah,
part of it is this moment of suspension as well. And, where everything is kind of coming and gathering. And I kind of hope that we're in that moment of suspension now where we've kind of become aware of the challenges that we are facing, and we're sort
yes.
of gathering ourselves
Mhm.
together. And joy is a way that we can gather together, is a way that we can come together in community, that we can be open-hearted, we can be authentic, we can listen to each other, we can use all of the pillars that you so greatly share in your book, and then we can move forward together and change this direction
Indeed.
to hopefully have a world where there is more balance, there is more joy for everyone, and we're not living in this space of like trauma and the impact of that we've been
Yeah.
struggling with for so long.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just want to thank you, Kelly, for
Thank
taking the
you,
time
Fiona.
to speak with us today, to also have distilled your lifetime's wisdom into a book. It's no mean feat to actually, get a book into the world. And I hope that it's, something that will fall into the hands of many people and inspire them to just, gently move through this journey with the sort of poise and grace that our beautiful horses can inspire in us. But it's been a pleasure, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk again, because I know that you you
I
could
love it.
share a huge amount of information that is incredibly valuable. But thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Fiona. Thanks so much for your generosity.
And I know you're not on social media as much anymore with your organization. I think you're still on LinkedIn, but not
Yes.
any of the other social media platforms. But I will have links in the show notes for people
Perfect.
to reach out to you through your website. And I think you've got a lovely newsletter that you do as well, that people can subscribe to and get their sort of wisdom from that. And as you mentioned, there's courses and things that you do that if people are interested beyond buying your book to go and learn more, then they'll be available there for people as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Fiona. That's wonderful. I
Oh,
look
my
forward to
pleasure. Thank you,
connecting.
Kelly.
Okay.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.